What if Tensura, the Jewel of Tempest? By KatarinaTempest. https://www.wattpad.com/story/380781961 Jewel of Tempest. Rimuru was taking a break after the entire orc invasion incident and decided to take a stroll through the forest. While walking along, he runs into a monster that was run out of their home by the orcs and lost their entire family to the attack. With nowhere to call home and no family to go back to, Rimuru accepts the monster into the new and growing town as his adopted daughter. The story will follow the main story beats of the light novel, but events will be changed due to a close bond forming between Rimuru and the new monster. The bond will be explored along with the world around the two of them, giving more depth to the characters and allowing them to move outside of the main story's narrative. Chapter 14: Reunion. Deep within the frozen expanse of the ice continent, two incredibly powerful beings sat at a table crafted entirely from solid ice, conversing casually with one another. These two were none other than the Frost Empress, Velzard, and her husband, the Demon Lord Guy Crimson. Standing quietly off to the side were their two faithful maids, one with striking blue hair and the other with deep green, patiently waiting to execute any command their masters might give. "So, tell me, Veltz, what do you think about her?" Guy asked, taking a slow sip from a glass of fine wine. Velzard, currently maintaining the appearance of a young teenager and looking elegant in a blue and white dress, turned her gaze toward him. She is improving, certainly, but she is still a long way from the incredible skill and power she once held. It is rather difficult to truly measure her current strength without testing it ourselves, though. "If only it were that simple," Guy replied casually, though a hint of underlying frustration bled into his tone. "You know as well as I do that we are strictly forbidden from interacting with her. At least, not until she either regains her lost memories or manages to find us on her own." As they spoke, Misery stepped forward toward the table, bowing gracefully before she spoke. "Lord Guy, Lady Velzard, it is time for us to depart. If we delay any longer, we run the risk of being late." Guy stood up at her words, giving a firm nod. "Understood. Veltz, do you think we should inform the others?" "No," Velzard replied firmly. "I don't want the others to get any strange ideas if we tell them about Katarina. She deserves to live her life freely. I absolutely do not want her to be weighed down by the heavy burdens that the others would inevitably place upon her." With those final words from Velzard, the four individuals vanished from the room into thin air. Meanwhile, far away in the Eastern Empire, a man sat upon a luxurious throne inside a grand castle, an unmistakable emptiness lingering in his eyes. The silence in the massive hall was suffocating, as no one was currently around to interrupt his deep thoughts. Suddenly, with a loud boom, the heavy front doors of the throne room swung wide open. A beautiful lady with vibrant azure hair, wearing a striking black dress adorned with a golden dragon, began walking confidently toward the throne. "Rudra, dear. It is time for us to go," Velgrind spoke, her powerful voice instantly snapping the Emperor out of his trance. Rudra looked up, the light slowly returning to his eyes as he shook his head. "You will have to go on without me this time. I have far too much work left to do here to join the gathering." Velgrind walked up the steps of the dais and placed a gentle, reassuring hand on his arm. "If you wish, I can stay behind with you instead." "No, you should go and meet with everyone," Rudra answered, offering a soft, reassuring smile. "Give them my warmest regards, and I promise I will make it to the next one." With a soft kiss and a promise to return to his side soon, Velgrind disappeared from the room. Once more, the Emperor was left entirely alone on his throne as a heavy silence fell over the chamber. Materializing in the deepest, most forbidden sectors of the underworld, Guy Crimson looked around the dark expanse. This area was an absolute dead zone, a sacred place where no living soul could set foot unless they were granted express permission by the Queen herself. She was a ruler known for her incredibly fair judgment, but also for a terrifying wrath that absolutely no one survived if it was directed at them. "It is good to see that you both made it, Guy, Velzard," a melodious voice echoed. Standing before them was a beautiful young lady with eyes as bright as violet crystals and hair as dark and deep as the absolute void. Guy looked over toward the source of the voice, a smirk playing on his lips. It is good to see you as well, heir. Care to explain to me why you are currently disrupting the balance of the world? With a soft, mischievous giggle, heir smiled back at him. My apologies, Mr. Mediator. But you are just going to have to wait like everyone else until the plan is fully completed. Don't worry, though, it is only going to cause you a massive headache. Enough, you two. The others have arrived, so we should head inside, Velzard interrupted, cutting the playful interaction short as she stepped forward. She walked straight through an invisible barrier, instantly vanishing from sight. Ladies first, heir, Guy said politely, before following the two women through the threshold. 7 other individuals followed closely behind them as they crossed past the barrier. Instantly, a scene that should have been completely impossible in the bleak underworld appeared before their eyes. They stepped into a lush, vibrant garden that easily outshone even the finest landscapes created by mortals. A single stone pathway led toward a charming, small house. It was a spectacular sight that never grew old, no matter how many times one witnessed it. I see the Queen's garden is flourishing as beautifully as always, Guy remarked, looking up at the perfect blue sky projected by the barrier, basking in the warm, artificial sunlight as they walked. It truly is a shame that it is completely impossible to duplicate this anywhere else. If it could be easily recreated elsewhere, then it wouldn't be grand enough to suit our magnificent queen, now would it? Replied a demon dressed in a flawless butler outfit, his black hair uniquely highlighted with distinct gold and red accents. Letting out a heavy sigh, Guy glanced back at him. Diawolo, please do not make this gathering weird again. As the sun began hanging low in the sky, they all gathered inside the house and waited for everyone to fully settle in. This was an exclusive reunion that occurred only once every century, and every single person in attendance shared one distinct feature: each of them wore a specialized bracelet. Velzard, Velgrind, and Guy wore the sacred bracelets of the true dragon family, which beautifully depicted 8 dragons coiled together. The other 6 primordial demons, alongside heir, wore bracelets of varying colors that microfilm depicted a single dragon. These bracelets were a physical testament to the immense trust they had earned over countless years of serving their queen. Furthermore, the bracelets acted as a mandatory key to pass through the outer barrier. Anyone attempting to enter without one would be violently repelled at best, or instantly obliterated at worst. Velgrind walked over toward Guy, a visibly sad smile on her face. Guy, sister, could I possibly speak to the two of you in private while everyone else gets settled in? Velzard, always incredibly sharp, immediately noticed her sister's troubled mood and gave a quick nod. Of course. We can talk in my old room. The house itself was remarkably simple when compared to the grand castles of the nations, but it held a unique, undeniable charm. It was a place designed to completely calm the emotions of anyone who entered, though it seemed to fail to do so right now. Guy couldn't help but think to himself, it is entirely unlike Velgrind to be this worried. And where exactly is Rudra? Upon entering the room, Guy immediately set up a privacy barrier and took a seat in a nearby chair. Velzard and Velgrind sat opposite him on the bed, and a quiet silence slowly fell over them. The room was nothing extravagant, containing only a standard bed and a desk, with very few decorations leaving it mostly empty. Guy wondered if the minimalist design of the rooms was intentional, meant to encourage everyone to spend their time out in the social areas of the house. Their queen was a profoundly social creature who thoroughly loved to talk and bond with others, so it certainly made sense. Does this situation have to do with Rudra? Guy asked, breaking the silence to kickstart the conversation. It really isn't like him to miss an opportunity to meet up, regardless of the ongoing game we play. Velgrind let out a heavy, weary sigh at his words. Yes, it has everything to do with Rudra. While I don't completely understand the intricate mechanics of how our bracelets work. She paused, holding up her wrist to show the family bracelet. I do know that when a bracelet completely stops functioning, it cannot mean anything good. Velzard narrowed her eyes, pressing forward for more details. What exactly do you mean by it stopped working? That should be completely impossible unless he has passed away. He is alive. Velgrind snapped defensively, before softening her tone. I am sorry. It actually began a millennium ago. At first, it would simply stop working randomly for short periods of time. But as the centuries passed, the situation grew far worse. More recently, it has stopped functioning entirely, with absolutely no signs of it ever activating again. Velgrin seemed entirely dead set on believing that Rudra was still out there. Guy, however, was not nearly as convinced. It makes sense that she refuses to believe he is gone. She is his lover, after all, Guy thought, pinching the bridge of his nose as he pondered how to gently bring up the very real possibility that Rudra was truly gone. You mentioned a few centuries ago that his soul was actively being chipped away. How is his soul holding up right now? Guy asked, wondering if the degradation had reached a critical point. Given Katarina's legendary mastery over soul-based magic in the past, it was highly likely that the bracelets connected directly to the user's soul. If his soul was entirely gone, even if his physical body remained, that would perfectly explain why the artifact had completely deactivated. Guy found it incredibly difficult to believe that the bracelet itself had a mechanical defect, especially since nothing like this had ever happened before. Her craftsmanship was entirely unmatched by anyone, even her own mother. Velgrin blinked several times in pure, unadulterated confusion before speaking up. I said that? No, his soul is completely fine. In that case, I don't think we will be able to figure out the root cause on our own, Velzard offered, stating their clear lack of knowledge on the matter. Our absolute best bet would be to ask our niece, but we have no idea when she will finally return. She is the only one who truly understands the magic behind these bracelets. As their creator, I am certain it would be a trivial task for her to fix it. Guy stood up slowly, walking over to the door and pulling it open. Velgrind, why don't you head downstairs and join the party? We will meet up with you in just a moment. Yeah, all right. Just don't take too long, you two, she replied with a forced, fragile smile before leaving the room. The moment the door closed, Guy turned to Velzard. His soul is entirely gone, isn't it? How is it possible that she doesn't realize it? Velzard let out a deep, troubled sigh. Something is terribly wrong. However, I don't want to blindly push into the unknown without gathering more information first. Let us play it safe for the time being and simply hope for the best, as there is really nothing more we can do right now. Opening the door once more, Guy stepped aside to let her pass. Agreed. We will proceed with absolute caution until we know more. Woodrow was a deeply cherished, close friend, and Guy genuinely did not want to accept the reality that he might be gone. He was willing to face the hard truth if forced to, but it would mean that all of these countless years had been completely wasted. Their grand game would have been entirely for nothing, and their forced separation would remain a permanent, painful scar on their shared history. Moving back downstairs to join the party, Guy looked around to see that an incredible spread of food and drinks had already been laid out. The primary reason these reunions were held only once a century was because the absolute finest alcohol in existence could only be found right here. Normally, it was kept locked tightly behind a powerful barrier, making it completely inaccessible. However, every 100 years, a single specific barrier was designed to fail, granting them access to a small fraction of the vintage drinks the Queen had stored away. Absolutely none of them would miss a chance to drink it for the world. Guy settled down onto a comfortable couch right next to Velzard and picked up a framed photograph that was resting on the table. It was an old picture of the true dragon family, though something about it deeply bothered him as he began to name each person out loud. Speaking strictly to himself in a low, puzzled whisper, Guy murmured, "The Queen's name is Sile, but what exactly was her partner's name again?" "What on earth are you talking about, Guy?" A woman with snow-white hair spoke up, her voice instantly drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Testarossa, you must remember he is an old man, so you will just have to overlook his terrible memory," Diolo chimed in, refusing to miss a perfect opportunity to tease him. Guy could only sigh, leaning forward as he thought deeply about what had just been said. "All right, in that case, do any of you actually remember what the Queen's true name is?" he challenged, wanting to test the glaring discrepancy in his own mind. "It is, wait, what?" Ultima stammered, freezing up. "Come on now, Ultima," Carrere laughed confidently. The Queen's name is obviously. Wait, why can't I remember it? You are all entirely useless, Tensura scoffed, stepping forward. Her name is obviously. She stopped dead in her tracks, her expression turning blank. Can truly none of us remember her name? Ultima, Carrere, Diablo, and Tensura all exchanged deeply unsettled glances, confirming that something was fundamentally wrong. It was as if every single person in the room had had their memories artificially altered, a feat that should have been completely impossible considering their immense power. Right at that exact moment, Air walked into the room carrying a fresh tray of cookies. Our Queen certainly does love her pranks, doesn't she? Who else in the entire universe could have completely rewritten all of our memories like this without a single one of us even noticing it? I wonder why she chose to give Guy and me completely different memories, though. Velzard pointed out, deeply intrigued by the mystery. Having such a massive discrepancy only helps us realize that an alteration took place in the first place. Who knows, Air replied with a shrug. We can simply ask her ourselves whenever she finally gets back. Though, looking around, I think a few of you might actually want to fight her because of it. Air was certainly not ignorant to the sudden spike of competitive tension filling the room. It was entirely true, Guy had already internally decided to deliver a solid punch to his stepsister the very moment she showed her face, and he could easily tell from the expressions around the room that several others felt the exact same way. He leaned back comfortably into the couch, picking up a cookie from the tray Air had brought. There is absolutely no point in dwelling on it right now. Let us simply enjoy this incredibly rare moment where we can all finally be together, Guy said, lifting the glass that had been poured for him to make a grand toast. To the Queen, who sacrificed absolutely everything to protect this world. Tensura immediately followed his lead, smiling as she raised her own glass high. To the Princess, Katarina, who manages to make every single day exciting and fun. To the rulers of the underworld, who gave our lives meaning far beyond constant conflict and strife, Air added, chiming in with her own glass. To the chaotic duo, who patiently taught anyone who was brave enough to request their training, Velzard said softly. Ouch, please do not remind me of the time we all tried to fight against them together, Carrere pouted playfully, rubbing her lower back before lifting her own glass. To the Princess, who truly knows how to cause the absolute maximum amount of destruction. And so, the toasts just kept on coming until absolutely everyone had a chance to speak. As each person added their own heartfelt thoughts, it became blindingly obvious that both the Queen and Katarina weren't just respected, they were genuinely loved. To anyone who knew them on a personal level, trying to find individuals more kind and caring would have been an exercise in futility. Guy couldn't help but find a deep, dark irony in that reality. After all, these two were the literal rulers of the underworld, and demons weren't exactly known for their warm hospitality, they were known for absolute, unadulterated ruthlessness. Time melted away as everyone intentionally suppressed their natural poison resistances, giving the alcohol total permission to wreck their systems while conversation sparked up everywhere. Within a single hour, the entire room was completely hammered, and the food was long gone, leaving little else to do but talk. With the vast majority of the guests letting their thoughts get completely clouded by the heavy drink, words began to flow without a single shred of restraint. Velzard and Guy were the only ones in the entire place who managed to keep their words on a tight leash. They had to play it incredibly safe, a single slip of the tongue could accidentally reveal to the others that Katarina had already secretly reincarnated into the world. Velzard's perspective. The reunion to honor those close to us who had fallen was finally drawing to a close. It was time for the ones with pressing duties elsewhere to get back to the grind. We worked tirelessly to ensure that the hard-won piece of this world, the exact piece my big sister fought so desperately to protect, would never be shattered. Velzard, before you head out, could I ask a quick favor? Air spoke up, her voice cutting through the noise just as people were beginning to file out the door. I sank right back down into my seat, studying her face quietly for a second. Ask away. Though, in exchange, I'd love to know what exactly you've been up to lately. Air looked down, chewing on the request for a brief moment before snapping her gaze back up, her resolve completely locked in. Fair enough, but I am only sharing this information with the two of you. Could you show me the final moments of my queen? I wasn't there when the dust settled. While I've heard Velgrin talk about it, I truly need to see the sequence of events for myself. By this point, the only people left inside the house were Guy, Air, and myself. There was absolutely no reason to rush, since no one else would dare disturb us in a place like this. Honestly, I was deeply relieved that the crowd had already departed. Misery and Rain had already left for home on Guy's direct orders the very second we realized where this conversation was heading. The last thing I wanted was a massive audience watching me completely break down while replaying that horrific day in my head. As someone who always prided myself on keeping my emotions under absolute lock and key, I loathed the idea of others seeing me unravel. Just actively forcing my mind to touch those memories was enough to bring me to tears. Back then, I had been completely blindsided, losing 2 more family members while I was still desperately trying to crawl out of the grief of losing my big brother. It had nearly broken my spirit entirely. If Guy hadn't been standing right there by my side through the worst of it, I am honestly not sure if I ever would have climbed out of the suffocating depression dragging me under. Settle in then, I murmured, letting my eyelids fall shut as I dragged my mind back to the exact day everything went to hell. Bracing myself, I projected my raw thoughts directly to Air and Guy, and the memories began to play out like a vivid nightmare. The flashback. The landscape was entirely obliterated after a brutal, week-long clash between Guy and Milim. I had spent the entire duration exhausting my power to maintain a massive barrier, purely to contain the absolute destruction and save the world at large. Because of that, I was completely paralyzed from stepping in to help during the fight. With the surrounding landscape literally vaporized into a barren desert, the catastrophic battle finally ended only after Ramiris stepped in to intervene. Ramiris! Are you all right? I called out, instantly dropping the barrier and flying straight toward her and Guy. Milim lay completely dead to the world, unconscious in Ramiris's arms. Ramiris looked up at the sound of my voice, a wave of profound relief washing over her face. I'm alive, though I am definitely going to pay a heavy price for using this much power later. Thankfully, I managed to calm Milim down, so she won't be tearing the world apart anymore. Ramiris, I absolutely hate to dump this on you right now, but can you please transport her back to the ice castle for us? This isn't the only apocalyptic battle that has been ripping across the globe, Guy said, his eyes turning sharply toward the eastern horizon. Go, Ramiris urged without wasting a single breath. I won't be able to do a single thing to help over there in my current state anyway. Please, just save them. Without waiting for a response, Ramiris flew off at top speed toward the north. With a quick, silent nod to one another, Guy and I bolted toward the Eastern Empire, pure panic and dread apparent in our every movement. This ongoing fight was magnitudes more intense than the clash Guy and Milim had just wrapped up. Going anywhere near the epicenter was a straight-up suicide mission for almost anyone. There's a barrier up, but massive cracks have been splintering through it for a while now. Everyone in the Eastern Empire is probably already dead from the sheer density of the magicules alone, Guy spoke up over the roaring wind as we flew. His words were almost unnecessary given the literal apocalypse unfolding right before our eyes. The Eastern Empire was completely unrecognizable. Entire cities and towns had been wiped off the map without a single trace left behind. Massive mountain ranges had been leveled flat, and the earth was scarred far beyond any hope of natural healing. With colossal holes bored deep into the crust and ravines cutting across the landscape so deep they looked bottomless, the entire continent had transformed into a living hell on Earth. There wasn't a single living soul to be found, outside of those actively trading blows and the ones desperately exhausting themselves to support the failing barrier. The ground was entirely on fire as magma surged violently up from beneath the crust, sending raging rivers of lava illuminating the suffocating smoke. It was an absolute miracle that the entire landmass hadn't fractured and sunk directly into the ocean yet, but even if it survived, this land would never support life again. With 2 unimaginably powerful women facing off against each other and showing absolutely zero signs of slowing down, the situation was beyond critical. The world would only continue to fracture under the onslaught of mist and deflected attacks. Soon, the continent would begin to slide beneath the waves, as the ground beneath them was actively being vaporized. Where the land was still intact, it was completely peppered with massive craters from the heavy impacts. We were only a minute away from reaching the barrier to help reinforce it when things went horribly, catastrophically wrong. Two massive, world-ending attacks lanced out from either side. Instead of cancelling each other out, both attacks bypassed defenses and landed direct, devastating hits on their targets. Freezing dead in mid-flight, I looked on in horror. No! I screamed in raw, unadulterated terror, not knowing if either of them could possibly survive a collision of that scale. As the blinding smoke and roaring flames slowly cleared away, the final outcome of the war was decided before I could even offer a shred of assistance. One person had vanished entirely, completely vaporized by the attack that struck them. The remaining figure floated weakly in the sky for a single heartbeat before collapsing heavily to the shattered earth. The barrier around the zone shattered completely, leaving the dense, toxic magicules to flood out across the world without any hindrance. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. My chest tightened as a profound disbelief at what had just happened surged to the front of my thoughts. Rushing forward once more, I slammed down right next to where my big sister had fallen. There was a sizable crater in the ground from the sheer kinetic impact of her fall. "Please, no. You can't leave me too," I choked out, kneeling next to her battered, broken frame. It was devastatingly clear that the fight had taken a horrific toll on her. Her clothing was completely shredded, terrible injuries covered her body without a single sign of automatic healing, and blood completely masked her face. "Please, just let me heal you." She lay there, entirely unmoving, save for the quiet, labored rasp of her breathing. Yet, with a divine beauty that shone through even the catastrophic injuries and blood, it was unmistakable who she was. Even lying here on the very precipice of death, her divine presence completely surpassed everyone else in existence. With void black hair tipped in royal purple, and eyes of solid gold, she was someone who routinely took the breath away from any mortal who dared look at her. While immortals would take note of her appearance, most grew used to it after seeing her many times over the eons. I was so completely consumed by my own overwhelming emotions that I didn't even notice as Guy, Velgrind, and Rudra landed at the edge of the crater. Honestly, I didn't care that anyone else was around as I leaned forward, desperately trying to channel my magic to mend her broken frame. But before I could even voice the incantation, my big sister weakly caught my wrist. "Don't. It is already too late for me." She coughed, the sound cutting deeper than any blade. "No, we can still save you. I can't lose you too, please." Tears flowed uncontrollably down my face as I tried to force my healing magic to manifest anyway. "You know as well as I do, the type of magic Cat uses," she whispered. The sheer strain of talking alone was visibly draining the last of her life force. "Veltz. Her soul is on the absolute edge of collapse. There is nothing we can do to patch her up," Guy said softly, placing a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. Shaking his hand off violently, I snapped my head up to glare at him. "I refuse to believe that. Veltz, my sweet little sister. You know this won't be the absolute end. I will be back eventually, so there is absolutely no reason to fall into despair." Big Sister's voice suddenly echoed directly in our minds, having switched over to thought communication to get her words across without taxing her body. "Make me a promise, all of you. Look after one another. Do not let the tragic events that have transpired today rip our family apart. I promise. We promise. Our family won't be torn apart, we will support each other through everything." Velgrind finally spoke up, her voice incredibly shaky as she openly wept. "That is good. Look after this world for me and Velda. It is his absolute pride and joy. I do not want him to despair over its destruction upon our eventual return." With a remarkably soft, peaceful smile, she slowly closed her eyes. I wish there was another way, but it simply wasn't meant to be. We were far too strong for this world. So, until it is fully ready to accept us back, it is best that we disappear for a while. We will. I will personally ensure that the peace and balance of this world remains entirely intact until each of you reappear, Guy vowed, kneeling down right next to me to give his own solemn reassurance. As my final gift to this world, I pray they won't hate us in the future. I thoroughly look forward to the next time we all meet. With that final, quiet exhale of breath, the world around us suddenly shifted violently. Ignoring the massive environmental changes at first, I let out a heart-wrenching scream of absolute sadness and despair. Losing 3 prominent members of my family in such a short window of time had torn my heart completely to pieces. It took a long time, but I eventually processed her last words and looked around at our surroundings. The changes were incredibly subtle at first. The vast devastation was actively repairing itself, and the overwhelming magicule density began falling rapidly. Then, I noticed something even more miraculous happening. Every single person who had died during both catastrophic fights was being actively revived, perfectly restored to exactly how they were before death. As the Eastern Empire was completely made whole, I sensed that the massive wave of change stretched out much further. The energy washed over the newly formed desert, returning the barren land back to its former, vibrant state as well. The only area and the only people left entirely unaffected were the ones who had started this entire catastrophic mess in the first place. The Elven Empire that had brutally killed Milim's friend was left completely untouched. Their people lay dead, and their land remained utterly decimated. No salvation would come to them, due to their direct transgressions against our family. It was a profound act of mercy that so much land was restored and so many innocent people were revived. With such a monumental act, the world would have far less reason to be angry with our family. At the same time, it would serve as an absolute warning to anyone who dared underestimate us. As the few people who revived close enough to us began walking over to speak, they mentioned that their memories of the horrific events were completely intact. Everyone would know the terrifying fear of angering one of us, but they would also know the immense mercy we could show to those who do not go against us. I knew right then that the title of Chaos Creator, which my big sister held, would certainly not be forgotten anytime soon after such events. Flashback end. Guy and myself were all crying silently in the heavy aftermath of the shared memories. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I reached up and wiped the tears away, desperately trying to calm myself down. The others were slowly regaining their composure as well, though absolutely none of us tried to hide the raw, agonizing pain we still felt. Sitting there in absolute silence for half an hour, each of us reflected deeply on our emotions. We couldn't help but wonder if we could have done anything differently to stop the horrific tragedy that took place. But with both Milim and Katarina going on an entirely uncontrolled rampage back then, there was really very little anyone could have done to stop them. It would have been completely impossible to stop them with minimal casualties. Both possessed a level of strength and combat training that only a literal handful of people in the entire universe could ever hope to match. Even with the collective help of other powerful beings, the battles would have still turned into long, drawn-out wars of attrition. Sister was the only one who had a real chance to stop Katarina. Fighting her own daughter, it couldn't have been easy for her. She knew that calming Katarina down was completely impossible at that point, and knocking her out was nearly as unlikely. The only option she had left was to attack with the intent to kill, and simply hope that it would be enough, I finally said, breaking the heavy silence now that my emotions were brought back under control. She sacrificed her entire life so that everyone else could live. That is just so incredibly like her, said, shaking her head with a soft smile. She wouldn't want us to be sitting around crying over her death anyway. We should be living our lives happily until she finally returns. Guy let out a soft, low chuckle. One step at a time, right? Even if a single step takes us an entire century. One step at a time, I agreed completely. Can you please tell us what you have been up to recently now? I would really like to move away from such a depressing topic for the time being. Right, of course, replied calmly, her words carrying an undeniable weight. To start with, I am fairly certain you both already know that Katarina has officially revived, right? Yes, Milim informed us some time ago, and we have been keeping a close watch on her from a distance ever since, Guy answered, providing all the information that was needed. Though, we have been constantly wondering why she didn't revive as, well, herself. Why exactly is she currently a Shadow Panther? I was incredibly quick to agree with the points Guy raised, there was absolutely no reason to hide what we knew from one another anymore. With everyone else having already left the gathering, there was no worry about anyone listening in. The fact that Air hadn't brought up Katarina earlier made it perfectly clear that she wanted to safeguard the information too. There were far too many dangerous people out there who would try to use her against us if they ever discovered the truth. In that case, I actually have a direct message for the two of you from the Queen herself, Air revealed. The message is, let Kat live a life of complete quietness, entirely away from the power struggles of those who are strong. She will meet you on her own terms, after which you are completely free to interact with each other as you please. I let out a soft sigh. So, this entire scenario was planned from the very beginning then. I truly wish they would confide in us a bit more. Regardless, we will continue exactly as we have been, watching over her carefully from a distance. If you would, in return, keep a very close eye on Testarossa for us, it would be an immense help. Kat has her bracelet back, and Testa might have already picked up on the spiritual link. It was actually before our big brother Veldanava passed away when Guy and I were originally approached by Katarina and Big Sister. They explicitly told us back then that if either of them happened to lose their memories upon reviving, we were to keep our absolute distance. They desperately wanted the rare chance to live a normal life, completely away from the staggering responsibilities that naturally came with being a true dragon. Air was incredibly quick to agree to the request. I am certain it won't cause any problems if she knows. She is highly intelligent. As for what I have been doing lately, I have been strictly carrying out the Queen's explicit will. She took her time explaining the details to us. She was routinely given specific messages to deliver to certain people at highly precise times. The ultimate goal was to help guide the development of the entire world onto a highly desired path. It was well known that my sister was a meticulous keeper of history, but only a select few people knew that she also possessed accurate knowledge of the future. Air was actively pushing events into the exact direction they were destined to go. With the way she described it, if everything went perfectly according to plan, things would be falling into place very soon. The mere idea of exciting things happening immediately caught Guy's attention. He had been incredibly bored of late while lazing around our frozen castle. She had already set a couple of major events into motion. She had pushed Dworgen into a formal alliance with Tempest, and she had highly suggested that the younger demon lords meddle in the affairs of the Jura forest. While one of those actions was clearly a massive benefit to the region where my niece currently lived, the other had me seriously questioning her underlying motives. Why on earth did you help guide the orc invasion directly into the forest? I asked, lashing out slightly as I accused Air of a dangerous recklessness. Kat easily could have been killed before any of us even realized she was back in the world. Air immediately held up her hands in absolute surrender. I am strictly the messenger here. I was not the mastermind who thought to do any of this stuff. You are just going to have to be mad at your sister the next time you see her. I wasn't exactly thrilled with that response, but I also knew it was completely pointless to continue that specific train of thought. Air was only given the messages to deliver, she wasn't told what exact ripples they would set into motion. She had started to become far more active around the world lately, and at least I finally understood the reason why. The world was being carefully guided in the right direction from the shadows, and it would only help Katarina in the long run. I was still naturally worried about Katarina's physical safety, but there was really very little I could do without directly interfering in the natural flow of events. Velzard, do you honestly believe Katarina would ever be left completely alone and defenseless in this world? I am entirely positive she has someone the Queen trusts deeply watching over her every move, Air said, sensing my anxiety and offering reassurance. And even if something unexpected did happen, we could always step in immediately, Guy added, offering a reassuring smile to help calm my nerves about the entire situation. I think it is officially time for us to get back to our respective duties. But before I depart, there is one final message for you, Air said, looking directly at Guy. Guy, enjoy the next Walpurgis. With that said, I will also be officially joining the next Walpurgis as a guest. Air stood up immediately after she finished speaking, completely refusing to elaborate further on the matter. Standing up myself, I found that I was suddenly thoroughly looking forward to the next Walpurgis after hearing such a cryptic message. Until next time then. And remember to bring your own alcohol next time. We are completely cleaned out over here. Air laughed, teleporting away before either of us could respond, her words still echoing in the quiet room. Guy, for his part, just laughed out loud at the statement. Well, it would certainly seem that Katarina isn't the only one who is going to reappear over the next century if the drinks are already completely gone. So it would seem. I am suddenly highly looking forward to the next 100 years, I replied, quickly picking up on the hidden meaning behind his words, internally thanking Air for the incredibly valuable information. If the hidden drinks were completely gone, and major events were actively being pushed into motion, it meant the entire world was right on the verge of a massive shift. With Big Sister's name being completely removed from our collective memories, I wouldn't be surprised at all if she had already successfully reappeared somewhere in the world. With the distinct possibility of her laying incredibly low, I decided right then and there to keep a very sharp eye out for her. It would certainly be just like her to try and completely shock everyone by appearing out of absolutely nowhere. With the conversation officially over, and the two of us being the only ones remaining in the house, it was finally time for us to head back home. Taking one last, long look around the empty house, I smiled fondly at the surroundings. I had made so many incredible memories here over the millennia, and I knew deep down that there would be many more to come in the future. Farewell, sister. Until next time, I whispered softly into the empty house, right before we teleported away. Chapter 15: Making Friends. Rimuru's perspective. We had only gotten back from Dworgen 2 days ago, and I already desperately needed a vacation. The exact moment we pulled into Tempest, our carriages were met with a massive crowd of citizens welcoming us back home. Honestly, I found it incredibly nice to just enjoy the moment, talking with everyone and getting to know the people. But all of that fun and joy ended abruptly the moment I walked into my office. Why on earth are papers overflowing onto the floor? I took one look at the absolute disaster of a mess, spun right around on my heel, and walked out. Nope. I officially quit. My freedom was incredibly short-lived, however. Shuna had followed me right to the office, and she immediately flashed her signature, terrifying smile. Come now, Lord Rimuru. As the leader of Tempest, you need to take full responsibility for the work that piled up while you were gone. And just like that, I was trapped in the absolute hell that is paperwork. It took 2 straight days, but I finally managed to get everything done by working around the clock without a single wink of sleep. Standing up from my desk, my knees wobbled slightly. After taking a second to regain my balance, I started walking outside to get some much-needed fresh air. Man, I am suddenly looking forward to my visit to Ingracia a whole lot less, I thought to myself. If that was the literal hell for being gone for a single week, I can't even begin to imagine what it will look like after a few months. Lost in my own thoughts, I wandered the streets completely aimlessly, until I was snapped back to reality by the rhythmic sound of hammers striking steel. Oh, I'm at the workshops. Well, I guess I can say hi to Kat while I'm in the neighborhood, I muttered to myself. I walked inside and aimed straight for the back area where Kurobe's personal workspace was located. Kat, are you in here? The space was suspiciously quiet as I approached, and I was completely unprepared for what I saw inside. Katarina was sitting huddled in a dark corner of the room, holding her knees tightly up to her chest. Next to the anvil lay a heavy forging hammer with its wooden handle snapped clean in half. And resting right on top of the anvil itself was a finished sword of a deep, pitch-black color. Why are you hiding over there? And why is there a broken hammer on the floor? I asked, thoroughly confused by the scene. With Kurobe nowhere to be seen and Katarina completely ignoring my question, I naturally reached out to pick up the mysterious sword. Even to my untrained eyes, it looked like an absolute masterpiece. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, regardless of its origin. No. Don't touch it. Katarina suddenly yelled at the top of her lungs, noticing what I was about to do. Master, stop right now, the great sage urgently warned in my mind. But the warnings came a fraction of a second too late. The exact moment my fingers wrapped around the hilt of the weapon, I felt an overwhelming, crushing pressure slammed directly into my mind. Kill. Slaughter. Murder them all. Kill. Kill. The weapon seemed to actively whisper directly into my consciousness, trying to force me to do things completely against my own will. I desperately fought back against the mental assault, but the pressure only continued to balloon the longer I held onto it. I tried to just let go of the sword, but it was already too late. My hand completely refused to obey my commands. A couple of seconds after I picked it up, there was a sudden, sharp impact right on my wrist. Blinking in utter surprise, I looked down to find the sword completely gone from my grasp. Looking around, I saw it clattering against the floor a few feet away. Katarina desperately grabbed my hand and yanked me far away from the weapon before vigorously shaking my entire body. "Snap out of it! Come back to me! Master! Are you all right?" the great sage chimed in, sounding frantic. Thoroughly shaken, and dealing with the literal threat of being turned into a slime shake, I stepped back and stared at Katarina. "What on earth just happened? What is that thing?" "It's a cursed weapon," she explained, taking nervous glances over at the sword resting on the floor. I was just curious about what kind of passive effects they would have. But once I actually felt the malicious energy radiating from the blade, I got terrified and backed off. "Mind telling me what you felt?" "Honestly, Kat. You know a cursed blade means nothing but trouble, but your curiosity still got the better of you." I wasn't angry, just deeply concerned about her making an unhealthy habit of exploring incredibly dangerous things. Katarina looked away shyly, rubbing the back of her neck. "Well, it felt like a total waste not to learn about it now that it's already made. I did actually try to destroy it, but, well..." She gestured weakly toward the shattered hammer to finish her sentence. "If you must know, it was pure evil. No one is ever allowed to touch that thing again," I said, letting out a massive sigh as I sat down on a nearby chair, desperately trying to shake off the mental echo. The two of us sat in silence for a moment, Katarina pondering my words before finally speaking up. "Well, the sage says it is technically safe now." With those words, she walked right over to the cursed sword and completely devoured it using gluttony. I looked on with pure worry for a second, only relaxing when I realized the sword's malicious ego hadn't taken over her body. Katarina turned back toward me and smiled brightly, a look of profound relief washing over her features now that the dangerous blade was completely gone. "It's officially isolated away forever now. So, there is absolutely no need to worry," she proclaimed happily. Shaking my head in disbelief, I muttered under my breath, "Talk about the biggest red flag in history. I won't be making another one of those anytime soon, I promise. For now, I am absolutely starving. Do you want to go grab something to eat, Dad?" Cheerful once more, she immediately spun around and headed toward the exit without waiting for an answer. I stood up and quickly followed her, not wanting to be left behind in the dark workshop. Back outside in the fresh air, the terrifying incident was quickly pushed to the back of our minds. We intentionally mingled with the citizens we passed along the street to help us forget about the cursed blade entirely. Katarina's perspective. I thought back on what the blacksmithing guide had written about cursed items, and I deeply regretted letting my curiosity get the better of me. The weapon was incredibly strong, there is absolutely no doubt about that, I thought. But that negative side effect is a literal curse. Why on earth would anyone willingly forge weapons like that? Giving a firm little nod to myself, I officially made up my mind. From now on, I was sticking strictly to conventional weapons and blessed armaments. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with cursed artifacts ever again. With those thoughts fully settled, I managed to focus my attention back on the vibrant world around me, thoroughly enjoying the rare quality time I got to spend with Dad. He had been locked away in his office for days on end. When I had tried to offer my help with the paperwork, he flat out refused, stating he didn't want to drag me through that literal hell with him. I couldn't really blame him either, especially after seeing how exhausted and drained he looked while working. I wonder if there is a realistic way to permanently lessen his workload going forward, I mused. What sage? Would be do help it manage nations others' paperwork? Possible recruit the think, to you. Affirmative. Though finding the right, trustworthy individuals to handle such tasks might be significantly harder than you think. Perfect. IA bring chance. During executive get-if-it meeting next hour up will. While I was conversing with the sage, Dad and I finally arrived at a quiet local restaurant. At this specific time of day, it wasn't likely to be crowded, meaning we could finally sit down and relax a bit. Gobichi, are you in here? I called out cheerfully as we walked through the front door, looking around the room. The only person I saw inside the building was a young girl with vibrant blue hair and matching blue eyes, diligently peeling a pile of potatoes. She was young, but still clearly older than I was. Hi, Stella. I certainly didn't expect to see you working here, especially after you visited the workshops earlier today. It was honestly hilarious watching you complain about the brass knuckles I forged for Big Sister. Dad was completely lost after my statement, looking back and forth between us in pure confusion. Wait, you know her? It's wonderful to meet you, Stella. I'm Rimuru Tempest. Yep. She came by the forge earlier today with Fars, you know, the lycanthrope fox we met when we were heading out toward Dworgen. I quickly explained to Dad so he could actually join in on the conversation. Hey, Katarina. I actually managed to talk to a ton of people around town while exploring with Fars. I guess that means I have to officially believe your crazy claim about being Lady Milim's sister, Stella answered. She then turned her gaze toward Dad, her eyes widening to the size of saucers. Wait. Rimuru? As in, the actual leader of Tempest. Dad laughed softly, waving his hand dismissively as he walked straight past her into the kitchen. That would indeed be me. I'm just going to whip up some quick food for us while we talk. Gobichi won't mind at all. I found myself giggling quietly as Stella stood there, completely flabbergasted by how casually Dad spoke to her, acting as if he wasn't the literal king of a rising superpower. It was highly entertaining, to say the least. Happy with how things were going, I moved into the kitchen as well to help prepare the meal, our movements falling into an easy, synchronized rhythm. It only took a few minutes to get the food fully ready to eat. While it wasn't anything fancy or elegant, burgers and fries were still absolutely delicious. Stella even got to try some of the freshly cooked fries we made, and her mind was completely blown by the flavor. Honestly, I couldn't blame her if she had only ever eaten raw food before, especially since Sis mentioned that the dragon faithful tended to eat like that. Just as we were about to sit down and dig in, Gobichi walked through the back door, getting a total shock from seeing us casually hanging out in his kitchen. Why does everyone get so completely startled whenever Dad and I show up in random places? I wondered. I know we are technically royalty or whatever, but they should really be used to our personalities by now. After chatting for a while, Gobichi happily agreed to take Stella on as an apprentice cook at Dad's personal request. I was also aggressively pushing for it in the back of my mind, hoping that Milim would finally get to eat some better-tasting food back home. Poor Sis always had to escape all the way to Tempest whenever she wanted to eat something genuinely delicious. With our bellies completely full, well, my belly was full, while Dad just dissolved everything instantly because he's a slime, we headed back out into the streets. While both Fars and Stella looked noticeably older than me, they both still maintained a wonderfully playful, upbeat attitude. I started to genuinely wonder if I could become real friends with them, even if I was physically much younger. Our next destination was Shuna's weaving workshop. Dad desperately needed to expand his daily wardrobe, and I wanted to pick up some new clothing options anyway. While we were there, I also wanted to ask Shuna for her expert opinion on a secret present I had crafted for Dad in my spare time. The gift wasn't anything incredibly extravagant, since it was my very first time trying my hand at making jewelry, but I still thought it turned out absolutely wonderful. When we finally reached Shuna's workshop, I couldn't help but smile widely at the scene outside. Hey, Fars! We just keep running into each other today, don't we? And I see you've already made a new friend. Hey, Katarina! We meet again, Fars chirped, looking up from her task. This is Nemu. She's currently having to work off the cost of some expensive fabric she accidentally damaged earlier. It's great to meet you again, Fars, Dad spoke up, instantly drawing everyone's attention to himself. Fars, who had somehow managed to completely miss his presence until that exact moment, nearly jumped out of her skin. Lord Rimuru. It is an absolute honor to meet you again. Nemu is Nemu. Nice to meet you, the girl with olive hair and striking green eyes finally murmured. It was incredibly obvious that she was a harpy thanks to the beautiful feathers on her wings, and it made me genuinely glad that so many diverse races could live together so peacefully here. While Dad completely distracted everyone, I decided to quietly slip away to chat with Shuna in private. After showing her the custom bracelet I had managed to forge, she was incredibly adamant that Dad would absolutely adore it. I still harbored a few lingering doubts, since it didn't have any fancy magical enchantments woven into it like my own bracelet did, but I chose to trust her words completely. Dad, here, I said, aggressively shoving the small gift box directly into his hands before physically pushing him toward the dressing rooms. Now go try on your new clothes. He smiled warmly at the unexpected gift, even if his eyes betrayed the sheer surprise he felt. Thank you, Cat. Wait, what? Okay. I'm going. With that, he vanished into the back of the building. With a soft blush dusting my cheeks, I turned back toward Fars and Nemu to strike up a conversation once more. I truly wanted to get to know them better, and Fars had such an incredibly outgoing, bubbly personality that it was effortless to talk with her. It was also the exact reason she had been able to form a bond with Stella and Nemu so incredibly fast. When Dad finally stepped out a short while later wearing a sharp black t-shirt and casual tan shorts, a massive smile broke across my face. Resting clearly on his wrist was the custom bracelet, depicting a playful black cat chasing a little blue slime. Do you actually like it? I asked, my voice suddenly trailing off hesitantly. No, I don't like it, Dad said flatly. There was a brief, excruciating pause as his words hung in the air, weighing incredibly heavily on my chest. Then, he beamed. I absolutely love it. You big meanie. Don't scare me like that. Humph. Crossing my arms tightly over my chest, I puffed out my cheeks, desperately blinking away the tiny tears that tried to form before he could see them. Dad just laughed warmly, stepping forward to playfully poke my cheek. Sorry. I couldn't help myself. Besides, you are way too cute whenever you pout like that. I am not pouting. I grumbled, offering the weakest defense possible. His finger actively prodding my cheek completely distracted my brain from thinking up a better comeback. Very cute indeed, a voice teased from the side. It was Fars, smiling brightly as she watched the two of us interact. Letting out a dramatic sigh of total defeat, I gave into the playful teasing and turned my attention back to her. We should definitely hang out sometime later. It was really wonderful talking to the two of you. That sounds like a lot more work for Nemu, the harpy mumbled sleepily. I would absolutely love to. I can definitely clear some free time later and come find you, Fars promised happily. The two girls had completely opposite responses, but it was incredibly encouraging regardless. With the firm promise to meet up again, and the thrilling potential of making true friends, there was a literal skip in my step as we finally headed back home. I was thoroughly looking forward to tomorrow, as I now had people my own age to talk with openly outside of Dad. The next day. I was fully planning to meet up with Fars today, however, Dad had entirely different plans on his agenda. The moment I finished my daily training routine at Kurobe's Forge, I was officially notified about an emergency, all-hands executive meeting scheduled right after lunch. It was the absolute perfect opportunity to bring up my system to help limit Dad's administrative workload, so I couldn't afford to miss it for the world. I arrived at the meeting room early to eat a quick lunch beforehand, noting that the vast majority of the sub-leaders hadn't arrived yet. Knowing I had plenty of time, I took my time enjoying my food as people slowly began to filter into the grand room. Dad walked in toward the very end, looking entirely surprised to see me sitting quietly in my designated chair right to the left of his. Cat? I'm honestly shocked to see you attending this meeting. Normally, you do everything in your power to avoid these things. Well, I wanted my attempt to help him to be a total surprise, but the sudden, direct question caught me completely off guard. I just wanted to bring something up with everyone, and this seemed like the perfect time to do it. He smirked playfully, looking down at me. Well then, everyone is officially here, so why don't you go ahead and bring up whatever it is right now? I can wait until after you are completely finished. It really isn't that important compared to whatever major reason you called this meeting for. I squeaked. I desperately wanted some extra time to build up my courage before addressing the entire room, and my window of opportunity was vanishing fast. Hakuru and Benimaru chuckled quietly off to the side, clearly noticing the intense hesitation in my voice. Thankfully, Shuna came directly to my rescue after seeing how incredibly uncomfortable I was getting under the sudden spotlight. Lord Rimuru, why don't we let her speak on it later? I'm sure she would appreciate a chance to fully gather her thoughts first. Thank you so much, Shuna. You are a literal lifesaver. I screamed out my gratitude silently, desperately trying to shrink out of sight as the attention was redirected. With Dad deciding to drop the topic for the time being, the meeting officially kicked off. Let's get started then, Dad began, dropping a massive bombshell right out of the gate. I called you all here today because I want to spend some time traveling through the human nations. It will be a wonderful opportunity to build formal ties with other countries, and I also have Shishu's final request to fulfill as well. I already knew he was destined to visit the human lands eventually to save the children Shishu had left behind, but I wasn't expecting it to happen this suddenly. I wanted to go with him, of course. It would be a phenomenal chance to explore the vast world and learn how humans operated differently from monsters. Several executives immediately voiced serious concerns about him traveling entirely alone, even if he planned to keep the entire trip strictly covert. It was a completely valid concern. If Dad was somehow captured or assassinated, the entire Tempest alliance would instantly face total collapse. He was the singular pillar holding everything together through his sheer strength and charisma, and very few people could ever hope to take his place. Benimaru tossed a much-needed lifeline to Dad in that moment, offering a compromise to limit the risk. Perhaps we could send someone along to help protect Lord Rimuru from the shadows. I will go then. I am his official bodyguard, after all. Shun declared, proudly planting her hands on her hips in a dramatic pose that would be far more typical for Milim to make. But Dad wasn't having any of it. Shun, this is a strictly covert mission. Unless you can fully suppress your massive aura, I absolutely cannot take you with me. Besides, I need you right here protecting Tempest while I'm away. Shun desperately tried to suppress her magical aura, but instead of shrinking, her power completely ballooned outward. The sudden, massive surge in strength actively threatened to tear the very building we were sitting in apart. After a brief moment of absolute panic, she stopped forcing it, and the structure was safe once more. In the heavy aftermath, Benimaru looked down dejectedly, knowing his own aura was far too massive to suppress cleanly, meaning he was ruled out too. I guess that means I will be holding down the fort yet again while you are away, Benimaru muttered, clearly disappointed but doing his absolute best to hide it. Hakuru nodded solemnly alongside him. I should focus on training our troops while you are away as well, unfortunately. Kuro was in much the same boat, fully occupied with forging and repairing weapons for the entire growing military. The only executives left who could realistically travel were Sue and Shuna. Sue had to constantly maintain his surveillance networks around the forest to keep everyone safe, but Shuna was technically free. Well, Shuna spoke up with a prim, elegant smile. I suppose it ultimately comes down to me then. Actually, I have a highly specific job for you here, Shuna, Dad spoke up, instantly dashing her traveling hopes. I need you to keep a very close eye on the main gates to ensure absolutely no one suspicious is entering or leaving while I'm away. With literally everyone else fully ruled out, I saw my opening and decided to try my luck. I can go protect Dad then. My magical aura is completely masked thanks to my bracelet. I held up my wrist, putting the enchanted jewelry on clear display. I had finally fully figured out how the concealment matrix operated, allowing me to hide or reveal my energy signature at absolute will. There was a collective, agonizing silence. With every single person in the room staring directly at me, I couldn't help but shift uncomfortably in my seat. I quietly activated SoulSight to figure out what everyone was thinking, only to realize that literally every executive in the room looked completely exasperated. What? I am just offering a logical alternative, I whispered quietly, the collective weight of everyone's intense attention suddenly making me feel incredibly shy. Dad was the first one to break the silence. You dummy! You are just as important to this nation as I am, so of course they aren't going to let you act as my bodyguard when you would realistically need protection yourself. Benimaru immediately chimed in right afterward. Lord Rimuru is exactly right. You are the official princess of this nation, so we absolutely cannot allow you to wander around freely in human territories either. With my traveling hopes completely crushed, I shrunk back down into my seat and let the rest of the meeting progress without trying to open my mouth again. It was eventually agreed upon that Ronga would remain hidden inside Dad's shadow for constant protection, and Sue would keep a shadow clone close by at all times as well. With the main objective of the meeting fully settled, I suddenly felt someone gently poking my shoulder to get my attention. Looking up, I saw Dad staring down at me with a deeply concerned look on his face. I had completely zoned out during the last part of the briefing, and that must have caught his eye. You mentioned you wanted to bring something up at the end of the meeting, right? Well, now would be the perfect time to do it, Dad offered a gentle, warm reminder. Taking a deep, stabilizing breath, I scanned the room to see how receptive the executives were before finally speaking up. I wanted to propose the idea that each primary department put together a dedicated task force to help handle the administrative work Dad has to deal with. It literally took him 2 straight days of working without sleep just to catch up on everything after we got back from Dworgen, and that is completely unreasonable. So, Benimaru can organize a team for military logistics and guards. Rigurd, along with the Goblin Lords, can do the same for the base government affairs. And Shuna, you should definitely recruit a few people to help manage the financial side of things, since I know you are carrying that entire burden right now. It will significantly limit how much work everyone has to deal with in the long run as our nation continues to grow. Dad was incredibly quick to agree to the proposal, clearly seeing that it would save him countless massive headaches in the future. I completely agree. I will be departing in a week, so we can use that time to actively test the people that each of you selects. He paused abruptly before correcting his phrasing. With everyone's collective help, I'm sure we can make this system work perfectly. Honestly, Master almost completely ruined the moment by outright saying he just wanted less work, the sage commented dryly in my mind. Dad it be didn't first. He if speak things thinking through without wouldn't. Fair enough. If you truly want to accompany him on this journey, I will assist you in convincing Master. Really? Sage. Thank much, so you? I remained completely hands-off when it came to actually selecting the individuals who would make up the new administrative groups. Having very little daily interaction with the other sub-leaders, I didn't know who would be the best choices for office work. I had thrown the concept out there, and they were running with it perfectly. Of course, I had an alternative motive as well. I wanted to give Dad significantly more free time that the two of us could spend together. I was incredibly happy to see everyone working together to make it happen, as it meant our future would be far less chaotic. With the meeting officially adjourned and everyone filing out to return to their posts, I lightly tugged on Dad's shirt just as he was about to step out the door. Can I please still come with you? I am incredibly curious about the human nations. Besides, I can't exactly be a good princess if I don't know a single thing about how the rest of the world operates. He shook his head slowly, looking down at me with soft eyes. I need you to stay right here where it is entirely safe, Cat. I highly suggest leveraging the unclaimed reward from the fishing tournament a while back to force the issue, the sage whispered, providing a stroke of absolute genius. The sage truly had the best ideas. I had completely forgotten about that reward, but right now was the absolute perfect opportunity to redeem it. Even if I say I want to officially use my reward from our fishing tournament on this trip. I countered, looking him dead in the eye. If there isn't a physical spot for me at the academy when we arrive, I will return to Tempest immediately without a single complaint. I promise. There was a long, agonizing pause as the sage apparently communicated with him internally as well, and eventually, he let out a massive, defeated sigh. Fine. I don't like it, but I know you will probably just do something incredibly reckless if I don't agree to take you. But if you can't enroll when we reach Ingracia, you are coming straight back home. Deal. Deal. I cheered, leaping forward and wrapping Dad in a massive hug to say thank you. My compromise had worked perfectly. Now, I just needed to figure out a clever way to get into the school as a student, or maybe even act as his personal assistant. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, I had absolutely no idea what we would run into once we set foot in human territory. With the meeting fully wrapped up and a little daylight left before dinner, I eagerly headed toward the training fields. It had been quite a while since I last sparred with Hakuru, and I wanted to make sure my combat skills didn't get rusty before we departed for the human nations. The hilarious sight I walked up to was entertaining enough to make me laugh out loud. Fars, Stella, and Nemu were currently getting absolutely dismantled by Hakuru, getting tossed effortlessly onto the hard ground over and over again. I remembered back when that was routinely me, not being able to last more than a few fleeting seconds against him, and it was deeply satisfying to watch someone else suffer through it for once. Lifting my hand and waving vigorously to catch his attention, I called out, "Hakuru! Care for a quick match? I want to make sure I didn't lose my edge while we were away in Dworgen." With a soft, knowing smile, the old master immediately dropped into a ready stance and waited. "I am ready whenever you are, Lady Katarina." After making absolutely certain that the bruised trio had scrambled completely out of the way, I drew my dual training swords, and the match began instantly. Within the first couple of lightning-fast exchanges, I could hear Fars and Stella aggressively cheering me on from the sidelines. From what I could gather, they were incredibly annoyed that they couldn't land a single hit on Hakuru, and they desperately wanted to see someone finally wipe that smug look off his face. The fight began with him methodically testing my fundamentals to ensure I hadn't forgotten my basics while traveling. Without activating any heavy battle wills or special skills, we cleanly exchanged strikes, our movements entirely fluid as we transitioned seamlessly between attacks and parries. Hakuru swung his blade down hard toward my head, and I met his strike with crossed swords, cleanly trapping his blade between my own. The moment he pulled back to reset, I swung low toward his thigh, only for my strike to be effortlessly deflected as his sword continued on a dangerous trajectory straight toward my neck. With a soft grunt, I leaned my upper body backward, avoiding the blow by a literal hair's breadth before instantly regaining my footing. Hakuru smiled warmly, readying his blade once more. "I see you haven't lost a single shred of your technical skill. Shall we step it up a bit?" Without waiting for a response, he completely vanished from sight using a flawless combination of flash step and form hide. I instinctively dropped down into a low crouch, spinning around in a full circle with both of my swords extended to catch him regardless of which direction he struck from. The desperate maneuver resulted in a sharp, ringing clash of steel as his blade collided with mine right behind where I had been standing, forcing me to leap backward to create some much-needed breathing room. Off to the side, Stella was screaming words of encouragement, but not wanting to get distracted and lose the match, I completely tuned her out for the time being. "That move is so completely unfair. I still can't track it visually at all. I have to rely entirely on pure instinct to counter you." "Even if you can't follow me visually, your instinct still successfully countered the strike," he laughed off the complaint effortlessly. I took a deep, focused breath and locked in once more. While I was still a very long way from fully mastering the various battle wills, I could at least channel a few of them, even if it was a bit sloppy. Attempting to completely blitz Hakuru, I dashed forward using a rapid flash step, almost landing a clean hit on his exposed side, only to be instantly shut down by a playful smack right on top of my head. Pouting heavily, I plopped down onto the grass and crossed my arms tightly, leaving my training swords forgotten on the ground beside me. I was so incredibly close that time too. Humph! Hakuru offered a warm hand to help me pull myself back up. You are getting noticeably better, and you can even utilize Flash Step effectively now, which is no small achievement for someone your age. If you keep practicing diligently, you will be able to beat even me someday. With his reassuring smile, I could only nod and happily accept his words as I stood back up, wiping the dirt off my clothes and putting the training swords away. I will definitely get there eventually. There is still a substantial amount for me to learn about battle wheels, and it's a remarkably slow process. You are so incredibly good, Katarina! Fars cheered, sprinting over. You almost had him completely open. Stella added, her eyes sparkling. Nemu thinks you did amazing, the harpy murmured, nodding in agreement. Fars, Stella, and Nemu walked over the moment they saw the match had officially concluded, doing their absolute best to cheer me up. They had watched the entire duel and were deeply impressed by how well I could handle myself against a master like him. I did my best to brush off the intense praise, insisting I wasn't nearly good enough to deserve it, but they completely shut me down, claiming I was just being overly modest. After the sparring session wrapped up, I went along with Fars, Stella, and Nemu to find a good spot in town to grab some dinner. Being able to just fully relax and enjoy the genuine company of friends was a wonderful change of pace. We talked about absolutely everything, and yet nothing of real substance at the exact same time. By the time we finally went our separate ways, the sky was already starting to grow quite dark. I had to sprint home at top speed before Dad got genuinely annoyed at me for staying out this late without warning him again. But with the firm promise that the four of us would meet up and spend quality time together tomorrow, I was more than ready for the night to pass by quickly. Having successfully made true friends, the rest of the week passed by in an absolute blur of laughter, with only a few occasional outcries of pain along the way thanks to Hakuru's brutal daily training routines. Before I knew it, everything was fully packed and ready for our departure into the human lands. Honestly, I found myself almost wanting to stay behind just to spend more time with the trio, if it wasn't for the thrilling allure of the unknown path ahead. My intense curiosity was simply too powerful to be denied any longer. Saying my final goodbyes to the girls, I promised to spend a ton of time with them the exact moment we returned back home. With everything fully prepared and the promise of new, exciting adventures ahead, I was incredibly eager to set off. There was just so much to learn on this journey, and I wanted to absorb absolutely everything I could. Chapter 16 Start of a Journey. Rimuru's Perspective. After the meeting ended and everyone agreed to let me head into the human lands, I couldn't help but let out a massive sigh of relief. Honestly, I was fully expecting a lot more pushback, endless complaints, and even personal requests from everyone wanting to tag along with me. Instead, it concluded with minimal disagreement, and Katarina even offered up a wonderful surprise by trying to organize some extra help for me with all that mountain of paperwork. Hey, Sage? Do you think I'm a bad parent? I asked quietly in my mind. Inconclusive information to properly answer the query. Please provide specific parameters on what defines the term bad parent. Well, you know, not being there for your child. Not giving them enough personal attention or completely neglecting their needs in favor of your own. I have never actually been a parent before taking care of Katarina, so I really don't know if I'm doing a good job. Based strictly on the parameters you have provided, you are an excellent parent. Mind explaining your logic there? You consistently spend quality time with her, diligently look after her physical and emotional needs, and frequently indulge in her personal desires to form a significantly stronger bond. I highly suggest simply asking her yourself, though, as I do not fully comprehend human emotions just yet. Right, of course. Why didn't I just think to ask her directly in the first place? Thank you, Sage. You really are the best. Master can feel free to praise me significantly more. Ha ha, you truly are wonderful. I really should just ask her myself. I constantly worry that she is trying to grow up way too fast and is completely missing out on just being a normal kid. The immense weight of being a princess of a rising nation can't be easy on her shoulders. With a soft groan, I stood up from my chair, looking out the grand window one last time before finally leaving the meeting room. There were still several urgent tasks to complete and people to see. I couldn't just sit around forever. The very first order of business was to secure a reliable guide for my journey into the human lands. Sadly, my personal human connections were rather limited so far, which led to me picking the only adventurers I could think of. Gobta, can you please locate Caval's group and let them know I have an urgent request for them? Shooting off a quick thought communication took care of that issue instantly. Understood, Lord Rimuru. I'll head out right now and let them know the second I find them. He thankfully accepted the task without any complaints, meaning I could focus my attention on other matters instead. With my thoughts cleared up, I started walking toward the sealed cave where Vesta was currently working. I needed to talk to him about our potion production and discuss King Gazelle's offer to send more research assistants before we officially departed. As I walked past the main training fields, I caught sight of Katarina intensely sparring with Hakuru. Wow, she has improved an incredible amount recently, I noted. But that just means I can't afford to let up on my own training either. I absolutely can't let my own daughter surpass me, after all. Deciding it was best to leave her to her practice, I continued my trek toward the cave, a joyful skip in my step while thinking about the future. Vesta! Gabiru! How are things coming along down here? I called out into the cavern as I walked past the massive doors blocking access to the deeper research sectors. Gabiru was the first to greet me, remaining entirely true to his over-the-top, dramatic nature. Lord Rimuru, we have been anxiously awaiting your arrival. This facility is absolutely magnificent, and things have been going wonderfully. Vesta quickly stood up from his workstation the moment he noticed me as well. I am incredibly glad to see you, Lord Rimuru. Thanks to your brilliant suggestions, we have been able to consistently manufacture 99% pure full potions. I am remarkably glad to hear that. If you have one on hand, I can analyze it right now just to be absolutely certain. Also, have the two of you been eating and sleeping enough lately? I asked, having the great sage run a passive analysis on the vial while we talked. I am doing quite fine, honestly. The cuisine here in Tempest is absolutely spectacular, and I have been getting the minimum amount of sleep required to function. Vesta was quick to brush off my concerns. Sighing softly, I looked him over with a critical eye. Please make sure you are actually taking proper care of yourself, Vesta. Also, congratulations, you have successfully brewed a textbook full potion. I handed the glowing vial back to him with a proud, approving smile. I couldn't help but shake my head at his blatant lack of sleep. Vesta was clearly focused way more on pure scientific research than the physical labor itself, so he was entirely in his element here. It was incredibly easy to see that he was genuinely enjoying himself now that he had the absolute freedom to work on whatever projects pleased him. Offering a warm smile at his visible joy, I turned my focus toward Gabiru. How have the hypercute herb cultivation efforts been coming along? Absolutely no problems on that front, my lord. I am putting forth incredibly diligent effort into raising them perfectly. Gabiru declared, completely unable to suppress his deep desire to show off just a little bit in front of me. Vesta happily backed up his claim, adding that Gabiru was rapidly becoming quite the formidable expert when it came to the actual potion-making process as well. I was genuinely glad to see him growing so much, and it gave me a lot of hope for his future. With the pleasantries and health checks fully out of the way, it was time to address the true purpose of my visit. I handed over the formal list of personnel King Gazelle was offering to dispatch to Tempest, waiting patiently to see what Vesta would think of them. I truly wanted to get some more qualified people down here to help take the heavy daily burden off his shoulders, as I knew he would far prefer to focus on pure, uninhibited research work. Vesta took a long minute to carefully scan the list of names and conditions before responding. With these specific terms, we could absolutely accept all of them. I have personally worked alongside several of these scholars before, and they are all wonderful, brilliant people. Are each of them genuinely talented? And more importantly, can we trust them completely? I asked. I didn't like being the pessimistic one in the room, but there was always the underlying worry about our national secrets leaking out. He was incredibly quick to respond with absolute confidence. Oh, yes, most definitely. I would be honored to have each of them assisting me in the lab. I will gladly stake my entire dwarven pride on the fact that they are completely trustworthy. With Vesta fully on board and Gabiru enthusiastically agreeing with him, we managed to get all the major points of interest completely covered. The only thing left to do was to formally inform King Gazelle about our decision and let Vesta take full control from there with training the new arrivals. Happy with the excellent results, I was about to turn around and leave before one last thought crossed my mind. Gabiru, if you keep doing a spectacular job down here, I am seriously considering promoting you to a full executive position, I mentioned. It was a sudden, spontaneous idea, but one I had absolutely no problems fulfilling if he proved himself worthy. I nearly regretted making the offer the exact second the words left my mouth, as he instantly got far too excited over the concept. He immediately started acting as if he already held the high-ranking position, shouting and thanking me profusely. Hold on, stop right there. First, you actually have to prove yourself over time. I quickly shut him down with a chuckle so he wouldn't get completely ahead of himself. Gabiru took the firm rebuttal surprisingly well, saluting proudly. Right. I am more motivated than ever before to do an exemplary job. I absolutely will not let you down, Lord Rimuru. With Gabiru thoroughly motivated and Vesta soon receiving a lot more help, I was completely satisfied with my visit. Teleporting myself back out of the cavern, I took a brief moment to enjoy the crisp, fresh air, noting just how late in the afternoon it had already gotten. Sage, where exactly is Katarina right now? She is currently spending time with Fars, Stella, and Nemu. So, she actually managed to make some new friends today. I smiled warmly. I definitely shouldn't disturb them then. There will be plenty of other chances to talk to her later. Knowing Katarina was happily occupied gave me some unexpected free time to take care of a few other loose ends. I headed straight over toward the central workshops to locate Kaijin, as I wanted to talk to him about how much our potions should realistically cost on the open market. We were already planning to sell Dworgen a batch of 100 low-tier potions for 2 silver pieces each, but I desperately needed an expert opinion on how much our high-tier potions could actually fetch. I had a basic, fundamental grasp on the currency system in this world by now, but that certainly didn't make me a master merchant. Having very little real-world experience in buying things from others using actual money, my knowledge was quite limited compared to most. High-tier potions weren't exactly commonplace in human territories either, meaning they could potentially sell for significantly more money than I had first estimated. By the time our business conversation finally came to an end, it was already time for dinner. Having taken care of every single thing I wanted to before heading out for the human nations, I felt both incredibly happy and thoroughly exhausted. It was finally time to grab some delicious food and get some well-deserved rest for the remainder of the evening. The rest of the week went by both incredibly slowly and remarkably fast. With significantly less administrative work to manage thanks to the new teams, I had a lot more free time to myself, though it also meant I had to actively find things to keep my mind busy. I was truly glad to see that Katarina had managed to form a solid bond with her new friends, and was genuinely enjoying herself during this brief period of downtime. Katarina was finally getting to act like the kid she actually was, playing with others instead of constantly working in the dirt or filing paperwork. She no longer spent her entire day locked away in the blacksmith forge or the training fields. Instead, she was spending her time socializing and smiling a whole lot more often. I still got to spend plenty of time with her, of course, but I never quite managed to build up the courage to ask her how she truly viewed me as a father. With Cavill's party arriving a full day earlier than I had originally anticipated, it was decided that they could rest up for the day, and we would officially head out the following morning. Katarina was also far more excited to see them than I was expecting. The moment they walked through the gates, Katarina literally ran in for a massive hug, slamming right into Aeon before anyone could even utter a proper greeting. "It is so incredibly good to see you again. And the boys too, I guess." She playfully stuck her tongue out at Cavill and Guido, causing several of the onlookers to burst out laughing. Aeon smiled widely as she embraced her back, gently patting Katarina's head, which earned an appreciative tail flick and a soft purr in return. "It's wonderful to see you as well, Kat. I hope things weren't too incredibly boring while we were away. Nope. I actually got to visit Dworgen with Dad. It was an absolute blast. Katarina was all smiles as the two girls immediately began catching up with one another. With Katarina instantly pulling Anne off toward the town's hot springs to chat, the other two male adventurers were left standing in my company. I warmly offered them a comfortable place to stay for the night and told them to enjoy some relaxation. I was absolutely certain they desperately needed it after trekking all the way through the dangerous forest just to fulfill my request to act as our guides. Third-person perspective. The rhythmic, echoing sound of steel swords clashing could be heard reflecting through the air as two swift figures fought intensely in the middle of a large clearing. With a dense, impenetrable wall of trees completely surrounding the field, there was absolutely nowhere to escape. One figure fought with a deeply reserved, tranquil calm, focusing almost entirely on absolute defense. Every single movement she made was perfectly calculated to utilize the absolute least amount of physical effort. She moved with the fluid, breathtaking grace of someone who had completely mastered the art of the sword, possessing the infinite patience required to back up such a defensive fighting style. The second figure, however, fought incredibly aggressively, pure determination shining brightly in her eyes. Each and every attack she launched was a calculated attempt to completely shatter her opponent's guard, searching desperately for weak points she could instantly exploit. With each heavy clash of their blades, neither side faltered for a single second, leaving the match at an absolute stalemate. To any untrained eye, it would look as though the two combatants were perfectly evenly matched, with neither individual gaining a single advantage over the other. But to someone who had truly mastered the complex art of combat, it was glaringly obvious that the one fighting defensively was comfortably dictating the entire pace of the battle. She would intentionally slow down her strikes a fraction of a second before they would land a fatal hit, purposefully allowing her opponent to recover her footing and regain her position. This was not a brutal fight to the death as a bystander might assume, but instead an incredibly intense, hyper-focused training session. The first individual looked completely identical to Rimuru, save for her piercing eyes of deep crimson. The second individual was Katarina, her striking, mismatched eyes completely locked onto the monumental task at hand. The two contrasting fighting styles clashed beautifully against one another, the sheer difference allowing the battle to continue for far longer than it realistically should have. The ground beneath them remained completely unmarred, easily withstanding the intense collisions of the two individuals even as the fight rapidly heated up. With the sheer intensity of their exchanges, one would naturally expect the earth to be torn to shreds, cracked, or even split open. Yet, despite the immense amount of force utilized, the grass remained just as pristine as when the two first began. The Great Sage and Katarina had been actively fighting like this for what felt like a year straight inside this realm, physical fatigue being entirely non-existent. Each of them continuously honed their martial skills against one another in an endless, beautiful dance of blades. Eventually, the two separated, fluidly sheathing their weapons. The vibrant world around them began to slowly dissolve before their very eyes as the Great Sage finally spoke up. It appears our time for this session is officially up. Katarina's perspective. Yawning widely, I slowly sat up in my comfortable bed. With my physical body having just woken up, my brain was desperately trying its best to do the same. UI Sage. Our clean didn't entire hit impossible, land manage on seriously single that time. To you. You have improved remarkably well, though. You should be thoroughly proud of how far you have come. Thank I'm seriously, able actively asleep. Been fast have help, never to train while without would you. There are absolutely no thanks required, it was entirely your brilliant idea to initiate this method to begin with. Absolute our best regardless. Still the you. Feeling a bit disappointed in my otherwise slow physical progress, I had previously asked the sage to find a clever way to help me train even when I otherwise physically couldn't. Her solution was simple, yet completely brilliant. She offered a way to seamlessly control my active dreamscape, completely erasing physical fatigue and making time entirely variable. It was the absolute perfect domain to practice my swordsmanship. I had honestly no real idea how the complex magic behind it actually worked, but with her unparalleled assistance, I was able to train without any of the real-world worries I would otherwise face. It was only our very first official session together, but we firmly promised to train like that at least once a week going forward. I had a funny feeling she would eventually drag Dad into the dreamscape fun as well when he least expected it. Honestly, I still have such an incredibly long way to go. I have definitely gotten better, but the sage is just completely impossible to beat, I muttered, stretching my arms high above my head before jumping out of bed to quickly get dressed. We would be officially heading out today toward the human lands, and I was already completely prepared. With plenty of clothing, books, and various snacks already safely stored away inside the endless void of Gluttony's stomach, there was absolutely nothing left for me to pack. It was universally agreed upon that we would head out right after breakfast, meaning there wasn't a massive rush to sprint out the front door. There was plenty of time for one final, peaceful meal in quiet comfort with Dad before we officially set off into the great unknown. Dad was sitting directly across from me at the table as we happily ate a breakfast of fluffy pancakes, though he was clearly thinking remarkably hard about something. "Kat, can I ask you a serious question?" "What's up?" I asked, tilting my head a little bit in confusion. "Of course you can ask me anything, Dad." With a soft huff of air that might have been a quiet laugh, a warm smile crossed his face. "What do you truly think about me? Have I actually been a good father to you?" "Who? Why on earth are you asking such a silly question all of a sudden?" I was caught completely off guard by the unexpected inquiry, trying my best to buy a few seconds to gather my thoughts. "It's just that I feel like administrative work has been consuming every single shred of my time of late," he confessed, the worry shining incredibly clearly in his eyes as he looked to me for reassurance. "I haven't been able to spend nearly as much quality time with you. I am just deeply worried that it might have caused some distance to grow between us, and I absolutely don't want that." Standing up from my chair, I walked completely around the grand table and wrapped my arms tightly around his neck from behind, keeping my voice serious. "You have been an absolutely amazing parent to me, Dad. When I lost absolutely everything, you took me into your home without a single question, and you have given me more love and happiness than I could have ever dreamed of in my entire life. You don't need to worry for a single second. We will always be family, regardless of anything or anyone that tries to pull us apart. If you don't believe me, then just think back on all the incredible fun we've had together in the past. Our wonderful trip to the Grand Lake, our amazing fishing tournament, playing together in the winter snow. I will cherish every single one of those memories forever. And I know you will do the exact same, right?" I wasn't entirely sure where those deep words were coming from, but I wanted nothing more than to see Dad smile brightly again instead of stressing over a complete non-issue. With a gentle hand reaching up to warmly hold my own, he let out a soft, relieved laugh. "You are exactly right, Kat. I'm truly sorry for even questioning you about it. I seem to have a bad habit of worrying about you over nothing. So long as you are actively worrying about me, it just means you care about me immensely. I see absolutely no problem in that, though I would appreciate it if you stopped stressing over the little things so much." With a massive smile that resonated clearly in my voice, I hopped back over to my own chair to quickly finish eating. With all of our worries fully cleared away and breakfast completely finished, we were both officially ready to set out and explore the vast world. I set out with the goal to see what human cities looked like, while Dad planned to forge new international political ties and locate the lost students of Shishu. Standing proudly in front of a heavy wolf wagon, we managed to say our final goodbyes to the town executives in record time. The wagon itself was being pulled by one of Ronga's powerful shadow clones that he could easily summon as the leader of his clan, making our travel speed significantly faster. The grand highway leading toward the Kingdom of Bloomland was already well under construction, meaning we had a completely clear, smooth path for at least a solid portion of the journey. Geld had joined us for this leg of the trip on the wagon to rejoin his construction battalions working further down the road, but he flat out refused to actually sit inside the covered wagon itself. He claimed he would take up way too much room when I asked him why. Instead, he sat proudly up front in the coachman's seat, even if the magical wagon didn't technically require someone steering it at all. "Rimuru, what the heck is up with this wagon?" Anne spoke up out of absolute nowhere, loudly complaining about the ride. It rides so completely smoothly, I don't even think the royal carriages of the human kingdoms are this advanced. I looked over at her with a thoroughly questioning gaze. What do you mean? There are still plenty of bumps on the road. She just let out a dramatic sigh, looking at me as if I had grown 2 heads. Kat, these tiny bumps are absolutely nothing. Trust me, if you ride in a conventional human wagon, your butt will be seriously hurting for days afterward. She is entirely right, you know. This carriage arrangement you have created is absolutely spectacular. Guido joined in on the conversation, firmly siding with Anne. I honestly don't see anything that remarkably impressive about it. Isn't something like this completely normal for the world? Dad sided with me, thankfully, asking them about other transportation methods. Anne pouted softly, shaking her head in disbelief. The two of you are completely impossible. Just you wait until we have to ride in a standard, everyday stagecoach on the way to Ingracia. You definitely won't be saying this ride isn't amazing then. With a mutual shrug, Dad and I could only take her word for it and let the conversation drop. I was perhaps a little biased, since I had never actually ridden in a wagon that wasn't custom-built by the brilliant craftsmen of Tempest. I could only feel incredibly sorry for the rest of the world if traveling was truly as agonizing as Anne was claiming. Though, the complete lack of technology meant we could easily sell these wagons at a massive premium to human nobles later. Maybe we should look into selling luxury wagons like this to wealthy human nobles and merchants for an absolute fortune, I suggested with a soft giggle, leaning my head comfortably against Dad's shoulder and closing my eyes. We could get incredibly rich off the ignorance of other nations. If we do, I definitely want a fair share of the profits for coming up with the idea. Anne seemed completely thrilled by the concept of selling the advanced wagons as well. She makes an incredible point, Rimuru. You could make an absolute mountain of gold by marketing these. If you ever want us to actively advertise it to the guilds, we wouldn't mind at all. A warm laugh filled the air as Dad heard the blatant sales pitch. You just want a free one for yourself, don't you? I will definitely consider it, but absolutely no promises. The conversation naturally lapsed into a peaceful silence as the wagon sped gracefully along the unfinished highway. The adventurer trio quietly muttered among themselves, agreeing that the two of us were completely crazy to think this level of comfort was normal. Dad seemed incredibly happy about the positive feedback he was receiving, so we just let the comments pass with a smile. By lunchtime, we had already successfully arrived at a small outpost cabin used by the construction crews. We had managed to cover roughly half of the total distance between Tempest and Bloomond in a matter of hours, but we would have to walk the remainder of the way on foot. There was about an hour's worth of cleared road left, and after that, the trio would officially take over as our primary guides through the dense wilderness. We ate a delicious lunch inside the cabin where we could be comfortable, and before long, we were right back on the trail. I was genuinely happy that we were able to cover so much ground in a single day, but a part of me felt it took away some of the rugged fun from the journey. Having already personally traveled nearly the entire expansive region of the Jura forest to map it out, I knew there was always something incredibly new and fascinating to find if you just took your time. Just a single example of the unexpected things you can discover in the deep forest was a majestic phoenix I randomly ran into during the recent summer solstice. It naturally passed away at the very end of its cycle, leading to me absorbing its essence and gaining a brilliant new mimic form. Most of the fire-based combat skills it had to offer were already covered by my absorption of Ifrit, but there was one unique intrinsic skill that I found absolutely fascinating. The skill, Rise from the Ashes, allowed me to completely restore all of my lost magicules to full capacity once per day. It was an absolutely broken ability if you ask me, as it effectively allowed me to continue fighting at maximum strength even if I was pushed to the absolute brink of death. It possessed a hidden secondary ability as well that I couldn't get clear information on, but it apparently was only usable once a year, resetting precisely on the day of the summer solstice. In a hyper-competitive, close battle, that skill could easily make the difference between victory and defeat. Though, if I was vastly outmatched in raw power, it wouldn't really matter in the first place. The specific thing I loved the absolute most about the mimic form was the fact that I managed to get a pair of beautiful new wings. They were composed of flaming purple feathers instead of the standard dragon or bat wings that Dad tended to use, and dare I say, they looked absolutely breathtaking. Of course, I had to be extremely careful whenever I actively deployed the wings. I didn't want to accidentally set the entire ancient forest on fire while flying around, which was its one major downside. While reminiscing on past events, we finally made it to the absolute end of the cleared road and had to exit the wagon, getting fully ready for the long trek toward Bloomond on foot. The rest of the afternoon quickly turned into an absolute disaster. Cavil and the others somehow managed to get us completely lost in the dense foliage. Dad had purposefully turned off his magic sense to enjoy the hike, and I wasn't paying any real attention to where we were going, trusting them completely as our guides. My focus was instead entirely directed on making sure we didn't get ambushed by a wild monster, which unfortunately led to us walking in literal circles. "Are we lost?" Dad asked bluntly, deadpanning at the trio as they whispered nervously off to the side. "No, of course not. I couldn't possibly imagine us getting lost," Cavil stammered out, sweating profusely. The defensive response alone was more than enough to firmly confirm Dad's suspicions. And they had started off so incredibly confident too, acting like seasoned, professional adventurers. I quickly stretched out my own magic sense at the answer and discovered we were actually just a short walk away from the base cabin Geld and his vanguard team were using. Dad was incredibly quick to pick up on this reality as well, casually offering to lead the way back. As we arrived back at the clearing of the cabin, the trio looked thoroughly sheepish, wondering out loud how they could have possibly gotten so completely turned around. Geld was the one to solve the mystery, stepping forward while holding up a strange, glowing flower which Aaron instantly recognized. "That's a baffledil, isn't it? They are a highly specific collection target for a B-ranked guild quest," Aaron exclaimed, carefully examining the petals. The plants apparently lived completely true to their name, emitting a passive hallucinatory pollen that caused passers-by to lose their sense of direction. Geld hadn't bothered to mention it earlier, assuming that since we possessed advanced magic sense, it would be physically impossible for us to get lost. After that grand reveal, we were incredibly quick to apologize to them for not helping out more. Geld and his industrious crew had already located and uprooted every single one of the flowers in the vicinity, leaving the path completely clear to continue work. Dad swiftly devoured the pile of plants with gluttony just to be on the safe side of things so they wouldn't cause any more trouble for future travelers. With that minor crisis taken care of, we enjoyed a wonderful dinner together and promised to assist more with clearing the path tomorrow. The following morning, we woke up to a beautiful, crystal-clear day that was absolutely perfect for traveling. Dad confidently took the lead, actively eating the dense brush along our path with gluttony. With Geld kindly offering to clean up the supplies we left behind after the path was cleared, I pushed Dad off to one side and took up a parallel position on the other. While we couldn't completely clear the entire width of the highway in a single sweep just by walking forward, between the two of us working in tandem, a massive portion of the future road was cleared effortlessly. It took us about a week to finally exit the forest, dealing with various hilarious shenanigans along the entire way. Honestly, I was thoroughly enjoying our time together, away from the chaotic, busy life of managing Tempest, just enjoying each other's company. While we traveled, Aaron kindly took the time to teach me the fundamentals of human magic. I was able to rapidly learn everything from basic cleaning magic to advanced ice and fire spells, which I knew would come in incredibly handy in fights going forward. Before this, the only tools I possessed against spiritual life forms were special skills. I wouldn't be able to utilize those high-level skills freely in human nations without drawing far too much unwanted attention, which is what led to my request for magic lessons. Naturally, I wanted to aggressively practice the new magic I learned, much to Cavil's ongoing annoyance. When we finally stopped to camp for the night, I playfully splattered him from head to toe in thick mud and dirt before sprinting away. Hiding safely behind Aaron, I instantly cast a perfect cleaning spell on him, making it look as though I had never gotten dirt on him in the first place, though, for some strange reason, he didn't calm down at all. "Why on earth did you blast me with mud?" "There was absolutely no reason for that," Cavil yelled at the top of his lungs, chasing me around the makeshift camp. Laughing without a single care in the world, I led him around in circles, frequently hiding behind Dad or using Anne as a human shield, hoping he would eventually calm down. I literally cleaned you instantly. Why are you still so mad? I just wanted to practice my spell casting. Cavil, stop acting like a baby. Absolutely no harm was done, and she was clearly just having a little bit of innocent fun. Let her act like a kid while she still has the rare opportunity, Anne spoke up loudly on my behalf. Eventually, we managed to calm his anger down once the food was fully prepared and ready to eat. Our nightly sleeping arrangements consisted of Dad and one other adventurer staying awake outside to keep watch, ensuring no dangerous monsters ambushed the camp. Then, 2 other people could sleep comfortably inside the wolf wagon on the soft benches. I managed to avoid guard duty entirely by transforming into my cute kitty form and curling up right next to Anne on a bench to sleep. Dad adamantly insisted that I be allowed to sleep fully every single night, saying something sweet about me needing proper rest to grow big and strong. It made me genuinely wonder if that was the exact reason he hadn't grown a single inch since the day I met him, because he literally never sleeps. I, on the other hand, have noticeably grown over the last few months, now standing a full inch taller than his human form. Getting to spend a full, uninterrupted week with Dad and the others without any heavy royal responsibilities weighing us down was absolutely incredible. A part of me wanted to adventure with them forever, but deep down, I knew I could never walk away from Dad and the people of Tempest to do so. Perhaps far in the future, when Tempest doesn't require constant executive oversight, we can explore the entire world together. The only bittersweet thought weighing down that dream was the simple fact that both Dad and I would live for far longer than any human ever could. As we rapidly neared the outer edge of the Great Forest, another major topic was brought up concerning me specifically. Dad could pass as a normal human well enough, and with Shishu's magical mask equipped, he wouldn't emit a single shred of monstrous aura. I, however, was a completely different story, with my prominent fox tail and ears sticking out like a sore thumb. The obvious solution was to use my mimic skill to take on a purely human appearance, but that came with its own hilarious problems. After actively taking on a human form, not much changed structurally, but the sensory shift was massive. My fox ears were replaced with normal human ears, which felt extremely weird as my brain started processing sound in a completely different way. The second major change was that my tail completely vanished. With those 2 physical counterbalances gone, the very first step I tried to take nearly sent me crashing face first into the dirt. How on earth do humans even stand upright like this? I pouted heavily, gripping onto Dad's arm tightly for dear life just to stay balanced. Without my tail to properly balance my center of gravity, walking is going to be completely impossible. Everyone instantly burst out laughing at my sudden, dramatic struggle, with Dad offering words of warm reassurance. Don't worry, Cat, you'll get completely used to it before too long. You can use my arm for support in the meantime. In a rare moment, my intense insecurity was on clear display for everyone to see, my fingers gripping tightly to Dad's sleeve as we slowly started moving forward. Oh okay, if you say so. I still think every single person born without a tail is completely crazy now, though. Not having a tail to counterbalance your weight is just plain weird. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about masking my own monstrous aura, as the custom bracelet I wore eliminated it completely, only allowing my energy to manifest whenever I purposefully chose to reveal it. With the issue of my physical appearance fully resolved, we continued our journey, though at a much slower pace on account of me essentially learning how to walk all over again. In the 3 hours it took to finally make it to the closest human village, I managed to successfully master walking on my own again. I was by no means ready to sprint or engage in combat just yet, but I was slowly getting the hang of staying upright without any major issues. With it being right around lunchtime and the next stagecoach heading toward the capital city of Bloom and not arriving for a while, we decided to hit a local tavern to get some food. With the glorious promise of a hot meal and something cold to drink, we all took our seats at a large table, ready to relax a bit. While sipping on some fresh juice, I couldn't help but look around the crowded room and admire all the diverse people sitting around. Each individual possessed their own unique quirk or personality trait that set them apart from one another, much like the monsters back in Tempest did. I was honestly surprised by how similar our civilizations actually seemed to be to one another, to the point where I felt like I didn't look out of place at all. If I hadn't hidden my true fox appearance, though, I would definitely be receiving a lot of weird looks. That, or maybe even hostile encounters, I mused. I'm incredibly glad Anne brought up the fact that lycanthropes and beastkin aren't very well accepted in human nations for the most part. While observing the crowd, one specific mercenary stuck out significantly more than the rest. He was standing proudly next to the carcass of a bear that had a horned hare's horn explicitly lodged directly inside its skull. "So, you know what I did?" the man boomed, boasting to the tavern. "I took my massive great axe and, wham! I smashed that giant sucker directly into the dirt." "Wow, that is absolutely incredible," BYDD, one villager gasped. "That's a remarkably dangerous monster, isn't it?" "You managed to slay it all by yourself," another chimed in. The people surrounding him were acting completely amazed by the grand accomplishment. With everyone around him fully believing the obvious tall tale, I couldn't help but let out a soft sigh at the sheer foolishness of some people. Is it really that incredibly easy to trick normal humans? Or maybe this specific village is just completely ignorant. Looking back toward the table we sat at, I decided to quietly bring it up with the others. If that guy honestly beat a horned bear all by himself, then I can easily beat Veldora, in a one-on-one fistfight. Whoops, letting people know Veldora is my literal uncle probably isn't the best idea. I almost completely screwed that one up, I thought, breaking into a slight sweat. I wasn't planning to actually bother this BYDD person myself, thinking it wasn't my place to butt in. I was just a visitor, after all, and not even human at that. "You are entirely right, Cat. He is clearly just trying to pass off a standard, run-of-the-mill forest bear as a high-level monster threat. Anyone with basic magical knowledge would see right through that," Anne whispered, looking over at his table with a critical glare. Dad laughed a little bit at the sheer absurdity of the display. "Honestly, some people just can't help but lie to make themselves look good. He is highly likely utilizing the tall tale to boost his local reputation," Cavil explained quietly, taking a sip of his drink. "Something along the lines of, 'I am incredibly powerful, don't worry, I will protect this town from danger, so how about providing me with free room and board?'" I tilted my head a little bit in confusion. Why on earth would someone feel the need to do that? They could easily just perform actual, honest work and earn their keep instead. Unfortunately, BYDD possessed some remarkably sharp hearing and managed to overhear our quiet conversation. Turning around with an angry glare, he slammed his fist on his table. "You think this kill is a fake? Why don't I step over there and prove my strength to you right now?"